Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education by Kate Colbert and Joe Salustio with contributions by Elvin Freites is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Get your Kindle edition or your softbound book. It's going to be
amazing.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business and will continue to do so. Dr. Joe Salustio back with you again and again and again. Excited that our book, Commencement, the beginning of a new era of higher education with insights from our first 125 presidents we interviewed on this podcast, will be out on November 22nd and available right now on pre-order, for pre-order on Amazon. And you can buy it wherever you, if you'd like, buy it wherever you buy your books from. And there's an electronic and a paperback version. And we're going to synthesize all those topics that college presidents have talked about and give it to you all at once. What was my guest? Wait a minute. My guest co-host wasn't here, and I think he's coming in. This is real-time stuff happening right now. We are recording. Has my guest host arrived?
He has.
Oh, my God. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Chuck Ambrose. He's chancellor at Henderson State University. Better late than never, Chuck.
Zoom, Teams, you know how it goes. So I'm just grateful to be here.
This is the sound effect you get when you're late. I don't want to
Sorry, Joe.
I don't want to write Chuck Ambrose on that button, but we're going to give you a free pass this time, Chuck.
Listen, I'm just so grateful to join Angelique. What a great conversation. So thanks for letting me in. Well,
Chuck, like all first-time guest co-hosts, you're not supposed to intro my guest. Every guest co-host I've ever had that's their first time says, I can't wait to talk with, and then they give the guest name. So I got to give you this button again because you're blowing up. And now I got to introduce her. Ladies and gentlemen, she's Angelique Albert. She's CEO of the Native Forward Scholars Fund. Angelique, how are you?
I am doing great, and I'm loving the energy.
This is the great thing about the EdUp Experience podcast is you never know what you're going to get. You could have a late guest co-host. They could introduce your guest without you even knowing that they're going to do it. It's kind of like a train wreck here. But one thing that is not a train wreck is, of course, the work that you're doing at the Native Forward Scholars Fund. So level set for us, Angelique, as we jump right into this episode. What is the Native Forward Scholars Fund? What do you guys do and how do you do it?
Oh, gosh. Well, we are the oldest and largest direct scholarship provider to Native students in this country. We've been around for about 53 years, and we have been providing scholarships to students. We've funded over 20,000 students from over 500 tribes in all 50 states. And we give about $15 million annually to students. And we also do some other work. We do wraparound services and some different programming for students. We've worked with over 1,700 campuses across this country and just worked to get students, Native students, those advanced degrees so that we can have representation in every sector and industry across this country.
You know, what's great about having you here, Angelique, we try very hard here at the EdUp Experience to get as many diverse voices on as possible. And we talk to diversity of people and diversity of institution that they lead, community colleges and private colleges. And when you talk about the people, I can only remember one, and we've tried really hard, one other or maybe two other Native American guests, Dr. Erica Moore. And she is, boy, what is she? She's the director of the Native Student Success. She's the director of Native Student Success at the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. So we love having you here because I don't think there is enough representation for Native students and the challenges that are real that they face getting into accessing higher education and staying in higher education, which can be one of the biggest challenges, right?
Yep, absolutely. And it's nice to have the representation. I think it's critically important with, over 600 tribes in this country. There are Native people. It's a small community. We're all connected. I was actually, interesting side note, you mentioned AHEC. I was Miss AHEC 1990 something.
Amazing.
have a they have a competition. It's an academic kind of competition with all the tribal colleges. So, so yeah, higher education is critically important, and the representation and visibility is critically important for us. It's one of our biggest barriers in this country. You know, time after time, we're called something else, or what was the recent thing? Indigenous creatures. So, you know, we're an asterisk, we're, you know, statistically insignificant. So it is really important that we have the representation and that our voice is heard. So thank you for having me on.
Well, we're going to hit the button as loud. Attention. We're going to hit the attention button so that everybody knows and listens to what you have to say. I think we have a responsibility to take care of our Native American population, indigenous peoples. And Chuck, I know you we're really interested in talking with Angelique, so I'm going to hand you the mic.
Yeah, you know, Angelique and I'm just fascinated in your journey, right? Because not only from the Native Forward that you've been on a campus, you've helped students with feet on the ground, but more importantly, you were one of those students, right? So when you think about the work you're doing today, through your perspective, how do you translate your path to the students that you really want to give access to?
Well, I am definitely of my communities. I was raised, I'm a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes from Northwest Montana. I went to a tribal college, received some undergraduate degrees there, and then went on to Gonzaga to get my MBA. And the interesting thing is, here we are 20 years later, 20 some years later, and our students are still going through the same challenges and the same barriers. And that's the thing that really it is difficult. You know, we recently we've been doing some research, and the numbers that are coming through it's the same challenges that we've had 20 years ago. So to see higher education be kind of stagnant for us as Native people is discouraging. I would say a little bit discouraging, but also with the research we're seeing, what are those indicators of success? And that's really a big part of what we do at Native Forward, is ensuring that our students persist, ensuring high graduation rates so that they can go on to do phenomenal work, like, you know, Secretary Deb Haaland, the Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland, and other prominent people, Fawn Sharp with the National Congress of American Indians. Just having Native people in places where we need to be is so important. But to do that work, we really need to start to move the needle on some things. So my experience does inform the work that I do for sure.
Chuck, you're also an artist, right?
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm sorry, and translating that expression and creativity, you know, to your work, right, Angelique? Are there things that you draw on for painting that picture forward for the students that you're trying to really engage in what a scholarship means?
Well, that's interesting that you you know a little bit of my background. I think that most Native people have art and creativity as just a part of our culture, but I think it is important to not only be creative, but to set that high standard and that high bar, because our Native students are just as deserving as other students to have access to higher education and to be successful in education. And so yeah, I would say that's a creativity, but also just setting those high bars and making sure that our students have everything that they deserve and everything that other students have.
Yeah, we're a great answer, and we're also on our third mistake by Dr. Chuck Ambrose, which is asking better questions than the host. Chuck, we gotta have a conversation. No, I'm just messing with you. I love that question about creativity. I think you know, we're in an industry that is screaming for creativity now, but the indigenous peoples are still facing some of the most basic challenges: homelessness, hunger, access. You know, how do you? I don't know. I mean, when we're talking about higher education, and it's always this fascinating dichotomy when you're talking about accessing higher education and simultaneously you're trying to talk about accessing food or finding a place to live. How do you that's a tough balance to maintain. How are you helping to work our Native population through these basic needs toward educating themselves at greater levels?
Well, I will say, if you haven't read the research that we just published, we did a research project with the other national Native scholarship providers. And in there, you get a very clear picture of kind of the financial sacrifices that our students have had to make. When you look at the average unmet need of our students, for here at Native Forward, it's $26,000 a year. And when you look at that study, it shows that the average revenue that our students are making is under 35,000. Doesn't leave a lot of room, right, for food and travel and all of that. We have 16% of our students are experiencing homelessness and food insecurity and all of that, and yet they persist, right? And yet they continue to navigate the college experience. For us, access and that financial need is the number one barrier to higher education, is to have the resources. I know we give away between $11 and $15 million annually, but still we're only able to fund 18% of the students who apply. And this past year,
Wow.
had an increase. This year, we have a 40% increase in the number of students who are applying for scholarships, and we're only halfway through our funding cycle. We are still, so that number is going to be even larger. So we see these things kind of, it may feel overwhelming, but here at Native Forward, we've implemented at the beginning of COVID, we had to implement a student emergency fund for any that to help them navigate the needs of whether it's gas to get to school or access to Wi-Fi or whatever that is, for help them with emergency needs. But also we focus on those things that we know are indicators of success. So the number one indicator for success and persistence for us is cultural support systems in place throughout their higher educational experience. So we ensure that here there's making sure that they're knowledgeable around the financial aid process. And so we have most recently increased our services to make sure that every student has wraparound services, advising, connecting to campus resources and all of that. In the past, we've only been able to do that for a select number of students, but with our new growth plan, that is something that's important, that every student have those resources so that they can be successful.
Chuck, before I pass it over to you, let me just ask a quick follow-up, which is, what do you attribute the increase in scholarship applications to? Is there just more Native students trying to access higher education now, maybe post-pandemic? Has it always been at that level, but just more people are finding out more about the scholarship fund? Can you attribute that growth of interest to something?
Well, for us at Native Forward, I think that the growth is twofold. I think that there is an increase in Native students wanting that higher education, but I think that there's also with the additional hands-on services that we have, where we're reaching out to students and helping them finalize their application process and seeing what supports they need to be able to navigate that application process. I think that also is an indicator of why they are finishing their applications, where before they may have had a difficult time understanding different parts of the application system, or maybe it's having their FAFSA completed and ensuring that all the documents were provided, the support documents. So I think it's twofold. I think there is an increase in Native students wanting to attain a higher education. I think that the visibility of the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, has I've seen a huge influx of young Native women wanting to be in politics, and that's always important. to see people like you and in positions where you actually are making a difference, and also with the new treasurer, Malerva, right, with her, so just having that Native visibility, I think, is also inspiring others to want to get a higher education. So I think there's a couple of different factors to that.
Is Native visibility, I've heard you say that twice or three times.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your term, or is that a mission-based two words that are set together on purpose for something, just out of curiosity?
I think that is a term in Indian country that is becoming popular because we are starting to communicate that more clearly with a broader audience of what needs to be. I think the most prevalent form of racism for us as Native people is invisibility. We are not visible, we're not heard, we're not represented, and we're not invited to the table. So having Native visibility is critically important. So it's a term that's common throughout Indian country. And Indian country is this country, right? The United States of America, and all the interconnectedness that we have as Indigenous people, whether we're on reservations, whether we're in urban areas. There's a network of Native people, and like I said, we're 300 nations strong, and so or 600 nations. I'm sorry. So there is a strong network of Native people. So Native visibility is just a common term that we use to promote that.
I'm glad I asked you that. See, Chuck, I can ask questions too that are pretty good. Your turn.
Wow, that's the whole line of conversation. That's so hopeful, Angelique, that the interest is increasing, and that there's role models out there that are lifting aspirations. It's tied to what you're doing to help meet basic needs. What would you tell a campus? One, to ensure visibility, but what would you tell us to meet you halfway of knowing these students and knowing how to serve them? What should we do to help?
I would say to anyone in higher education, anyone on college campuses, to first read the research that we published and try to incorporate some kind of meaningful way to reach our students through the data. I think that data-informed decisions are always usually the best decisions.
Nailed it.
To give you an example, for us, we know that the 60% of our students take on $10,000 or $10,000 in student debt or less. So for us internally at Native Forward, we're trying to get our scholarships up to $10,000, and we have been able to do that to be able to reduce that student debt. So number one, I would ask institutions to read the research, incorporate the research in any way you can, in a meaningful way for our Native students. Number two, we know that successful campuses, just so you know, 50% of our funding goes to 30 campuses across this country annually.
Wow.
There's a handful that are doing it well, and the campuses that are doing it well have Native professors, have Native curriculum, they have Native peer groups, they have Native American houses or cultural support kind of campus houses to help students, and sometimes they have cultural events on campuses, and those are key to making sure that your campus is inviting to Native students, and whenever you can, invite Native people to the table.
Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, by Kate Colbert and Joe Salustio, with contributions by Elvin Freites, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Get your Kindle edition or your softbound book. It's going to be
amazing.
And just as an aside,
and Angela, do you have some of those campuses matching funds? I mean, to kind of, as you mentioned, the $10,000, but to really try to be very aggressive in meeting need? Are there good examples you'd hold up of helping to kind of match the scholarship amount?
I do not have, I don't have good examples of that. I can say that we're increasing our outreach to campuses to work more closely to see how we can not duplicate services and really lift up each of those students at that campus. So we're working on building stronger relationships with institutions right now, but I don't have a strong example of a matching funds situation.
Maybe
Angelique,
something we could talk about.
Yeah, Angelique, I wanted to just mention as we're talking about this, the report that you're referencing is I believe the National Study on College Affordability for Indigenous Students, and it's of course on your website nativeforward.org. Two bits for me that I found just like mind blowing, were the stat, and I'm going off of memory, so you're gonna have to correct me. It was like 72% of the participants said that they've run out of money within the last 6 months. Or running out of money once every 6 months. And you think about something like that. And then on the next page, I remember it saying something like 68% of the participants are expected to contribute to their family financial situation. And I'm going to myself, that all of that together, when you put all of that together, that you're going to, a participant's going to run out of money in a 6-month period and is expected to contribute to the family financial situation and has to take on debt to some degree to go to college. Oh boy, that's tough. And a lot of us, I'm going to say us, because I was one of those people. I didn't have to contribute anything to my family when I went to college. I just went to college. That's a tough situation.
Right. Yes. And that's what I'm saying about the research. It really paints the picture of the financial sacrifices that our students are making to be able to go to college. I know we have the 16% are, the part that was shocking for me is that 16% are experiencing homelessness. And I know internally, I've had students where we've had conversations and they chose to live out of their car so that they could continue to go to college. Now that's a sacrifice right there. And know that they're running out of money for food and car expenses and books and housing and food and all of that is the true experience of a Native student and what you have to do to go to college.
Chuck, back over to you. Sorry.
No, and again, I think even what would that tell us as campuses about some of the basic needs support if we were really focused, not only increasing that visibility, but enrollment. And you had some very interesting founders that got this Native Forward started. And looking at the history, just the participation rates, the amounts of scholarships you've awarded, I mean, it's phenomenal, right? As you look back at some of those founders, Angelique, what inspires you, right, as a CEO of the organization you're leading? Because they obviously knew, as you just were discussing, and certainly the data presents the challenges that Native students face to even access college.
For me, this is what drives me. And I'm so glad that you asked that question because when I started as CEO here, that legacy is what made it. That's what I'm passionate about. You have John Rayner and Bob Bennett who started this organization. And if you look at the history, it was at the end of the boarding school era and at the beginning of the self-determination era. And that is a critical point in history because at a time when my grandfather, who went to boarding school, was dealing with trauma of the boarding school. At the same time, you have founders like Bob Bennett and John Rayner who are like, okay, the boarding school, that was not a real education. That was more of a tool of oppression. Our Native people need a true education, and they recognize that. They recognize that 53 years ago and recognize the power of that. And, for us to be able to now say that we've educated, over 1,600 lawyers and over 2,200 PhDs in this country, that to me is what their intent was. That's what it was about. It was that one story, times 20,000 people, but that one person has the ability to make an impact when you have that education. And so that is something that drives me, just because that's personal to my own story, the boarding school experience. And, that's something that my mom's generation went through. My grandfather went through personally. My grandmother went through. I have a lot of family members who went through that. So I can't even imagine going through that. And at that same time saying, yes, but we need to advocate for a true education. So for me, that's a big part of what drives me on a daily basis, is just staying true to that original vision.
Wonderful.
I was waiting to use that one. That was a good moment. Chuck, keep going. I know you got more.
Well, Angelique, it's just the juxtaposition of what, the data tells us about the resiliency of these current students. But the history also, when it said in 1967, there was only 13 Native students in graduate school. And I just stopped for a moment to, and we know, especially through the pandemic, these disparities, right, have just become so real. I'm just appreciative of the data, because it just makes me think, as a chancellor of a university in South Central Arkansas, is what can we do, right, to activate a response. We're learning, right, that the scaffold supports that every student needs are changing dramatically. Is there a student or two that you would hold up, right, to just say, let me just tell what this scholarship has meant here in the midst of a college experience that no generation of college students have ever experienced through COVID? Is there something that I know it's hard when you're running a program like that to know the students that you're interfacing with, because they're coming nationally and have such incredible stories. But is there one or two that you just say, wow, this is what gets you up in the morning?
Yes. And like I said, I'm also of our communities, right? So I hear the stories and I see the young people back home who apply to go to Ivy League schools and get in, and their parents are making $30,000 for the household. And I just think of one young lady who her parents filled out the FAFSA incorrectly, and our staff were able to kind of help them through that. But now she's going to Berkeley, right? And you see students who have used the funding to go get STEM scholarships and have gone out, and they're revitalizing traditional food systems and traditional ways back home, where you have people who are opera singers, right? They're going out and they're moving things forward for us as Native people in places where we've never been. Secretary Deb Holland is an alum. She's look at Cynthia Lamar, who's running the Smithsonian National Museum of American Indians. She's a scholar. There's so many individual stories that are so moving, where just a little bit of funding and a lot of drive and determination, our students are truly making an impact across this nation, whether they're advocates for Native communities and tribal sovereignty, or whether they're educators, with all those PhDs out there. They're out there on college campuses educating our students. And we have a lot of our board members who are giving back their time and volunteering to this organization, but they are actually alum who are out there, making a difference. We do have alumni who are in media and doing creative content, right? With the Reservation Dogs, Migazi, one of the producers, is Native Forward alum. And so they're just, we're more than 20,000 strong out there making a difference and contributing to this country.
Amazing.
I will, because This is such an important topic because I understand the cyclical nature of this in that if you're going to fix these problems, you've got to get people through the educational pipeline that are armed with the skill sets to come back into the Native population and help in a more robust way financially or with greater knowledge. Do you see that help return, right? So you've gotten these scholars, you've rewarded these scholarships, and these Native folks go on and they get these PhDs or degrees or masters or bachelors or whatever, it doesn't matter. Are they always coming back into their communities or a Indigenous community to help with these new skills? Do you see that often?
I do see that often. That's a cultural value. So
Awesome.
although it's not all of the students, some of them are out there, in corporate America,
Sure.
but also you see a large amount of them going back into tribal communities and running corporations for our tribes. So it's nice to see the tribal economies, strengthening because of the students who are going back and serving our communities. But not just that, when I talked about revitalization of our traditional food systems and our traditional ways, I think that's critically important. It's important that our education serve us in the way that we think is important. You can go on to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, go onto our reservation and you have pristine natural resources because that's important to us. And so it's important that we do utilize our education in a way that's important to us. You see students who are focused on hydrology, sustainable energy, and different things that are important and that will serve our tribal communities in the way that is important to us. So we do see that a lot.
Yes, love it. And do you how important was this report on the affordability to the national study on college affordability for Indigenous students? How important and impactful is this report? Was it telling you something that you knew and the data now backed it up? Is it something that's going to happen more often now? Is it really painted the picture for the state of the Indigenous population? What is the impact to the community, and how do you use this moving forward?
Well, I would say that this was the first of its kind in that it was a combination of 4 leading scholarship providers, 4 national organizations, Native-led organizations coming together and having voice for our students. It was more important that we collectively did this data so that we could have a voice for all of our students. So it is Indigenous based, and it is kind of for us, by us, to share with the world. It is a baseline.
Incredible.
It is the beginning. It's truly just the starting point. So I think that most of us, it told us what we already knew. There were a couple little nuggets in there that were like, oh, wow, I didn't realize it was that extreme. But for the most part, it told us what we needed. Moving forward, we are still a collaboration. We are still in partnership with the 4 organizations, and we are doing additional research at this time, and we'll continue to grow that. We want to get to the point where we are giving scorecards to universities for how well they're doing in serving Native students. But there's
that is interesting.
Yeah,
that is interesting. I gotta be honest, that's interesting.
There is more to. I think this is the starting point. This is the baseline. This gives everyone kind of a place to go to for the information, so that we're no longer the asterisks. We're no longer statistically insignificant. Here's some statistics. Here's some data, and I think that it's relevant for people, whether you're serving high schoolers, whether you're in a higher education institution. I think there's something for everyone here. If you're serving Native students, there's something here for you to use. But yes, it's baseline, and we look forward. Please be watching for more to come.
Chuck, over to you.
Well, and Angelique, the scorecard and certainly the accountability. A lot of institution designations, between MSI and HSI, and is there a designation that aligns you to that commitment institutionally to say that you are a active partner with the Native population? You mentioned that you have a heavy concentration of scholarships going to a relatively small number of schools that have made the kinds of really commitment to serve students. How are they identified? How would you learn, right, to better serve Native students? And again, is there a network that kind of readily helps students find those schools?
Well, the interesting thing with the research, just as this is a little bit of a side note, is that a lot of our students are basing where they go to college on what is affordable, which is not how we encourage them. We want them to achieve their dreams, not, get whatever education they can. But there are tribal colleges and universities across this country, which they're aligned with AHEC. And so there are about 38 tribal colleges at this time, but there are also tribal serving institutions, and there's a certain benchmark you have to meet of how many tribal students you have at your institution. So those are two indicators, but I'll tell you that only about 10% of Native students go to TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, only about 10%. The other 90% go all over the country to mainstream universities. So it really comes down to which ones, and this says this in the study too, what are those indicators of success? And it's those cultural components that are integrated into the educational experience, and feeling like they have those peer groups on campuses and those type of things. So for us, we encourage the institutions to make sure that they have those type of services on campuses for our students.
Well, I will tell you, we could talk forever. I know we could, because there's so much that's important to say. Before we move to our last two questions, I think it would be important for you to tell our audience, which is filled with institutions or those that represent them, what do you want? Not what do you want, what do you expect institutions? Because I feel like there's some kind of, I don't know, built-in, or at least maybe we should feel some built-in responsibility to serve our Native population because of that invisibility factor that you talked about. And we want to bring the visibility here. How do we do it? What do we do to partner with you? How does it work? Do you come to us? Do we come to you? Can you talk about that blocking and tackling, so to speak, for a second?
Absolutely. I think that first and foremost, look at the history of your institution. How was your institution formed? Is it a land-grant institution? Is there something that you can be doing to ensure that Native people are coming to your campuses, such as tuition fee waivers if you're near a Native reservation? Yes, I would encourage you to reach out to tribes in your areas. Most of them have education departments. Reach out to TCUs, which can be feeder schools. Reach out to anyone who is close to you or that you feel you could work with. So I would say that number one, yes. So to connect, to increase that partnership with tribes and tribal community members. And then the other thing is to be aware that the number one obstacle for us as Native people to be successful is that access, and it's that financial barrier. So if there are any ways to create scholarships or increase those scholarships to Native students on campuses, that is going to be probably the number one thing that will help them. So if you can do that on your campus, I would encourage that. I guess those would be my top takeaways.
Love it. Chuck, before I close out the episode with our final two questions, do you have any final questions from you for Angelique?
Yeah, no, Angelique, that last comment you made, would you say that the real place to start for campuses is within your own community? I mean, I think, seek local and then connect with the network for scholarships like Native Forward. That would really, in terms of activating a campus response, would be the first place to start.
Absolutely, because if you look at the land that you were on, that is the traditional homeland of someone, right? And so that is, those are going to be the people who care most about that land and that place. We're place-based people. So absolutely start at home. That's a traditional home of Indigenous people. So that would be my encouragement of where to start. And then looking at those access to the finances, and then whatever kind of additional services you can provide. And yeah, and connect and partner with people like us as Native Forward. We do scholarship administration for corporations, tribes, foundations. And so we're always looking to increase our funding to provide to the student, and that student can go to any campus nationwide. So that's our number one goal. That's what we're really focused on over the next 5 years, is increasing our revenue so that we can make sure that we can fund the other 80% of the students who apply. So
donate. If you want to help, you can also donate. You can go to the website. You can donate money to the Native population, and then Angelique and crew will know what to do with it. So don't sleep on that. Anybody can take action and donate to these amazing folks. Angelique, we always ask the same 2 questions to close out our episodes. Number 1, what did we not say? I mean, Chuck's new, so he probably forgot to ask you something that you were hoping he would here. So what did he forget to ask you about the Native Forward Scholars Fund that you were hoping to say? Anything you have coming up, events, speaking engagements, new besides the report, which we did talk about. And if you want to repeat how to get it, that's great. Anything you want to say at all?
sure.
And then I'm going to give you the second one because you can roll right into it. What do you see as the future of higher education? And you can add in for Indigenous people.
Well, I will say a couple of things that I didn't say is that we are going to be presenting at South by Southwest EDU in March, which we're very excited about. So if you can join us, it will be myself and Dr. Henrietta Mann talking about the boarding school era and how higher education can support Indigenous communities and Indigenous students. Secondly, I would say that this year we have increased our programming to students, so please connect with us on social media. We have a full year of programming for your students, for your Native students out there, from career supports to wellness. And so please follow us on social media so that you can get those services out to your students. And then the second one, what was your second question? Sorry.
What do you see as the future of higher education, particularly for Indigenous populations?
Yeah, the future for Native students is, I think we're at a pivotal place right now where there is a great awakening and people, there's an allyship and people who are becoming more aware, and it's a beautiful thing. So I do see the future of higher education for Native students really beginning to shift and increase. You know, the numbers of students are increasing, the funding is increasing, and we're going to see a lot more students in higher education. And my hope and desire is that the institutions out there and our communities are there to support our students and what they need to persist and graduate and go out and be what they want to be in this world.
For those that want to connect with you, Angelique, what's the best way to do that? To find you on LinkedIn? Do they go to the website? How do we get with you and ask you questions or talk about partnerships? Whatever we can do. Where do we find you?
Well, I would say LinkedIn for sure, the website, and then I will give your audience my email, and it's angelique@nativeforward.org. So I encourage you to reach out and develop a partnership with us.
Amazing. First, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank my guest co-host today. It was a little rocky to start, but he came through in the end. It's Dr. Chuck Ampro, Chief Chancellor at Henderson State University. Chuck, well done, my friend.
Thanks for letting me have this conversation with Angelique. Awesome. Thanks.
And of course, our esteemed guest, who is giving you her email. She's looking for partnerships. Step up to the plate, ladies and gentlemen, and serve our Native populations. She's Angelique Albert. She's CEO of the Native Forward Scholars Fund. Angelique, did you have a good experience on the podcast today?
Oh my gosh, I had such a great experience. I loved both of you. Lemlemch, Chineslemthi. Thank you. I'm so thankful for you and everyone for having me.
Well, we appreciate you, Angelique. And ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, by Kate Colbert and Joe Salustio, with contributions by Elvin Freites, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. Get your Kindle edition or your softbound book. It's going to be
amazing.